Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where it's a rather cool, chilly and overcast day here at the park as the autumn season is, I guess, well underway. It's kind of beautiful here. We still have some leaves in the trees, a lot of gold and red and beautiful colors here. As nice as it is, I'm kind of sorry to see the summer season go. I prefer summer. It's my favorite season of the year. It's nice to be able to go to the beach and enjoy the sunshine and wear shorts and short sleeves and things like that. Winter is normally a season I don't look forward to very much, but this winter is kind of an exception because we plan to go and do some skiing this winter. Last winter we went up to Hokkaido for a couple of times to go skiing, and normally I don't ski. I haven't skied since I was in high school, and when we went last time I decided to try to get back into it. Took a couple of days of ski lessons and then hit the slopes by myself, and I had such a wonderful time. I was wondering, why the hell did I ever give up skiing? So this time I plan to do as much skiing as I can during the time we are there. It's been a long time since I last made a video here. It's been a few weeks since my last video about the Yashica Lynx 14. I apologize for the delay, but it's been quite busy here. First, I've received a lot of orders for cameras, and it's a lot of work to keep all the orders filled and all the shipping and all the stuff which goes on. And a lot of complications due to coronavirus and all that, getting these things shipped out in kind of as a timely manner as I can. And then dealing with UPS, which those of you who are familiar with UPS can probably sympathize with what it's like to work with them, especially when it's when you're doing international shipments. So it's quite a lot involved in that. And then another thing was we decided to go on a short trip. So we were out of town for some days. We had been wanting to do some international travel, but for obvious reasons that's really difficult nowadays. So and we really wanted to get somewhere very different and far away from Tokyo. So we packed up and we headed south to Okinawa for a few days, and it had quite a wonderful time. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure everyone has heard of Okinawa, though they probably don't know much about it. Okinawa is a few small islands well south of Japan, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Okinawa in Japan is famous for its poverty, but it's also famous for its beautiful beaches and hotels and beautiful places to stay, kind of get away from Honshu. We stayed in a hotel which had a nice view of the swimming pool and beach and such like that, and we drove around to different parts of Okinawa and enjoyed the sights and the sounds and the smells, and had a really wonderful time. And when I was looking at the beach by the hotel, I was looking at the sand, and it was so white and beautiful, and I was thinking, this can't be real. There's got to be like that sand that they ship to like Ko'olina or Kapolei on the west part of Oahu and Hawaii, where they don't really have good natural sand at these resorts. Then I looked out and found out that all of Okinawa has this beautiful soft white sand all around it. It was wonderful to walk through it and collect the bits of coral and stuff like that. The ocean was really wonderful, nice and warm and clean and clear, much different than what we have up here in the mainland part of Japan, where the ocean is quite a bit colder and the beaches tend to be brown or black due to either volcanic soil or just dirt, and a little bit polluted up here, and minor bits of trash and stuff like that, whereas the beaches in Okinawa are so clean and beautiful. So Okinawa is definitely going to be near the top of our list for a place to see when we travel around Japan in the future. So now I've wasted about 4 minutes of time. I'll go ahead and get started with the subject of today's video, and that is going to be another Canon SLR camera. As you can see, this is an early Canon SLR from the late 1950s. This particular camera is the Canonflex RP. In the late 1950s, during the same time that Canon was actually producing its Canon P, and a little bit before the Canon 7 rangefinder cameras, Canon decided to get into making SLR cameras. And they decided to come up with kind of a professional or semi-professional line of these SLR cameras, which were the R model for reflex. And there were 4 different variations, if I'm counting right. I'll go ahead and run through them. The original Canonflex was a camera very similar to this one, but with a silver body and a black prism, which you could lift off and replace. And then there was the Canonflex RP, which was the same camera but a lower cost and simpler camera without the interchangeable prism. Then there was the Canonflex R2000, which featured an extra stop of shutter speed, a 1/2000th top speed. And then the Canonflex RM, which featured a built-in light meter, kind of like what you see in the Canon 7. The original Canonflex, the one with the interchangeable prism, was supposed to be kind of the basis for a professional system camera by Canon, but they kind of, I guess, abandoned that idea for whatever reason, deciding it wasn't marketable or feasible or whatever. And when I had these cameras, I was kind of curious about the original Canonflex because it had this removable prism, but there weren't any other prisms available for it. And though you could remove the prism, the focusing screen wasn't interchangeable in it. So I was kind of wondering what was the point in the system. And it turns out it was just something that was started and put into production, but not carried along with. Despite all this, and despite the fact that Canon kind of abandoned the old R series cameras for, I guess, whatever cameras they replaced them with, they were actually really good cameras. I really like the design, the feel, the quality of the cameras. It's really good. They're very durable and reliable. And I don't know, maybe it's kind of a shame that Canon didn't stick with it. For this particular Canonflex, this one is painted black, this RP, which makes it kind of a rarity because most of them came in a silver color. The R2000 I think only came in silver. The regular Canonflex was only silver and black. The RM and the RP black was an extra cost option, which not a lot of people went for. And I don't come across a lot of these. This one is, I guess, a kind of fair example. You can kind of see the brassing around the edges here. Most of Canon's cameras, you can tell when they are the real thing because there's brass under the black paint. The exception being the Canon P, which was nickel plated before being painted black. So if you come across a Canon P and it has like scratches on the corners and it's not brass underneath, it's still kind of a silver color, there's a chance that it's actually an original black paint camera. However, keep in mind that Canon didn't black paint over the chrome finish, only nickel finish, and you can kind of tell the difference between the painted over chrome cameras and the painted over nickel cameras. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the features, controls, and functions of the Canonflex RP. Starting at the top here, we have the film rewind lever, which has an arrow on here telling you which way to turn it. It bends up at kind of an angle here, so as you're turning it, you don't like pinch your finger between the lever and the prism. Below the prism, we have an indicator here, or reminder indicator, where you would set the film speed or film type. This is just a mechanical reminder, and it doesn't actually have anything to do with the operation of the camera. Of course, here we have the prism on the top. It's kind of flat on the top here, and like some of these cameras that were kind of meant where you could like sit them on the top, rangefinder cameras and such. Over here we have the film counter window, and next to that we have the shutter release button, which accepts a standard cable release. And here we have the shutter speed dial, and we have a full range of speeds from X and B from 1 second to 1/1000th of a second. And it turns all the way in complete circles, not like some circles or I guess dials where you stop at B and then you have to go back the other way. If you're at 1/1000th, you have to switch to, say, 1/4 of a second, just turn it to 1/4 of a second like that. Easy peasy. On the back of the camera here, we have a removable eyepiece, and these cameras were made with optional diopters, so you could adjust them to match, I guess, the performance of your eyes, or if you wear eyeglasses. On the front here, we have this kind of bracket on the front where you can attach an accessory light meter, which Canon produced for these cameras. We have the self-timer system here, and this is pretty much the same thing which comes on the Canon 7 and Canon P rangefinder cameras. On the bottom here we have a standard 1/4 inch tripod socket. We have a release button for releasing the film winding mechanism so you can rewind the film. Over here we have the latch which you use to open the film door. It just pops open like so. A little easier than some of the other cameras. And also we have what is the unique feature to the Canonflex cameras, and that is this unique trigger winding system, which allows you to quickly wind and rewind the camera from the bottom. When this camera was produced, the electronic motor drive wasn't quite perfected yet. Leica had been playing with them. Nikon had produced their F36 motor drive for the Canon F, and there were other makers kind of getting along with them, but the small high-power motors hadn't been perfected yet, and neither had the drive systems and gears been made strong enough to, I guess, withstand the use of professional photographers. So a lot of the makers used a simple trigger winding system, and Leica, of course, had their Leica bit winder for their early rangefinder cameras, and then as well as for some of their later model M series cameras. Canon introduced a similar trigger wind system for their rangefinder cameras, the 3 and 4 and such like that, and then some cameras like the VT or whatever, that was actually the winding system. So Canon thought that this would be a really nifty thing to have on a camera, and this was pretty much the only winding system we had on the R series. And as I said, it works quite well. It's very fast, it's easy to use, and once you get used to it, you can see why professional photographers enjoyed it. The lenses on these cameras, these use what were called a super canomatic lens, which is kind of the earliest of the Canon SLR lenses. These evolved later into the FL and FD lenses, and these are kind of limited to be used on whichever kind of camera they were designed for. These can be used on later model cameras with adapters and such. This particular one is the 58mm f1.2 lens, which was the fastest lens Canon made available for these. As you can see, looking at the glass, it has this nice golden color from the thorium glass which Canon used. In those days it was called rare earth glass, and the lens had, I guess, thorium coatings, which is mildly radioactive, and this lens will cause a Geiger counter to react a little bit if you hold it nearby. The reason for using this was to prevent chromatic aberration. If you don't use a special kind of glass or a special kind of coating on the glass, in a really fast lens, it's really hard to focus the colors on the same plane. And if you're shooting color film with a camera like this, you'll kind of notice you get red fringes around the picture because the red focuses in a different point than the other colors. For black and white film, you don't notice it so much. One lens that I notice, a modern lens which has this thing really bad, is the Pentax A 50mm f1.2 lens, which I think is a beautiful lens to look at, and a beautiful lens when it's mounted to a nice camera like a Pentax LX or whatever, but is actually a really bad lens because of this terrible chromatic aberration. It's not at all that bad on the earlier 58mm f1.2 Canon lens. Overall, these are a really good camera. They don't have a lot in the way of weaknesses. Some weaknesses that they have, sometimes they get the self-timer can stick on these cameras. It's not a common problem with the Canon cameras, like on the rangefinder camera. It's not a really big deal. The slow speed escapement can stick on these cameras, so the shutter speed sometimes runs slow or won't run at all at the lower shutter speeds. And sometimes these have a similar problem to the Canon 7, where the shutter curtains don't close all the way. Unlike the Canon 7 and other rangefinder cameras, like the Canon P, this doesn't have metal shutter curtains, it has cloth curtains, so you kind of have to be careful with them getting, fungus or rot in them. That sometimes happens if they're not stored in a really dry environment. But most of these cameras which I come across, this one included, seem to work just fine. And maybe, actually very few of these cameras which I've come across are not operable at all. Sometimes the slow speeds stick. If the slow speed is sticking in the camera, simply take off the lens, and if you look here you can see this kind of little lever here in the bottom which moves back and forth to actuate the mirror. The slow speed escapement is located below that, so if you drop some lighter fluid into this opening and let it seep into the bottom of the camera, most times that will unstick the slow speed escapement, and then the camera will work the way it should. Anyway, that's it for my review about the Canonflex RP camera. I'll be listing this camera for sale soon in my stores. I have a lot of other cameras I'm working on right now, so if you're interested in this camera or another camera, please visit one of my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.